The 1970s. A decade of disco glitter, political unrest, and bold cinema that dared to test society's limits. Amid the blockbusters, there were films too raw, too unsettling, too transgressive for audiences of their time. Movies so shocking, censors locked them away. Today, we rediscover 12 stories once silenced, reels of rebellion, vision, and fire. 1. The Devils, 1971. A convent erupts in hysteria. Nuns convulse, their bodies writhing in frenzied devotion. At the center stands Urbain Grandier, a priest accused of heresy, torn between faith and desire. The camera lingers on crumbling walls, on fire swallowing sacred spaces. Ken Russell's vision is nothing short of operatic madness. Oliver Reed, as Grandier, imbues the role with tragic arrogance. Vanessa Redgrave's Sister Jean, twisted by repression and longing, is unforgettable, a character driven by desire, guilt, and rage. Theirs is not a romance, but a collision of broken souls trapped in a world that fears both flesh and spirit. Released in 1971, The Devils faced immediate outrage. Religious leaders condemned its blend of sensuality and blasphemy. Nations moved swiftly to cut, censor, and ban. Even in Britain, Warner Brothers forced edits, leaving Russell's unflinching masterpiece fragmented. The Vatican denounced it outright. And yet, decades later, its power has only grown. The sets by Derek Jarman, stark white fortresses against the flames, remain some of the most haunting in cinema history. Critics who once recoiled now call it a daring indictment of power, repression, and mass hysteria. Its imagery still shocks, but its meaning runs deeper. How fear weaponizes faith. 2. A Clockwork Orange, 1971. A milk bar, white furniture gleams beneath neon light. 4 young men dressed in bowler hats sip drugged milk, eyes glinting with mischief and menace. From this moment, Stanley Kubrick announces his intent. Cinema will never be safe again. At the heart is Alex, played by Malcolm McDowell, a charming, violent anti-hero whose smirk unsettles as much as it fascinates. His friends orbit him like shadows, bound together by loyalty and cruelty. Their violence is balletic, choreographed to Beethoven's soaring music, turning horror into something disturbingly beautiful. Released in 1971, the film ignited a firestorm. Critics decried it as ultraviolet pornography of the mind. The British press linked it to copycat crimes. Under mounting pressure, Kubrick himself withdrew it from UK circulation for decades, an act that cemented its legend. What remains is more than a film about violence. It is a meditation on free will, morality, and the fragility of choice. Decades on, A Clockwork Orange remains provocative, its imagery burned into pop culture, its questions unresolved. Are we shaped by society or by something darker within us? 3. Pink Flamingos, 1972. A trailer in Baltimore. Inside, divine, larger than life, lounges like a monarch on a throne of kitsch. Around her, a carnival of misfits celebrates filth, freedom, and rebellion against polite society. John Waters didn't just make a film, he detonated a cultural bomb. Divine's competition with another eccentric couple for the title of filthiest person alive is the backbone. But what lingers isn't plot, it's performance. Divine's unapologetic presence, the grotesque humor, the gleeful embrace of everything society called obscene. When it premiered in 1972, Pink Flamingos scandalized audiences. It was banned in parts of the United States and outright outlawed in countries like Canada and Australia. Censors recoiled at its explicit scenes, and word of mouth spread it like contraband. People lined up at midnight screenings, daring themselves to endure it. Half a century later, its shock remains intact. But beyond the outrageousness lies something else: defiance. Waters gave outsiders a mirror, a place where difference wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated. In its filth, there was liberation. In its humor, there was freedom. It wasn't just shocking, it was revolutionary. 4. Straw Dogs, 1971. A quiet village in Cornwall. Mist clings to the rooftops as an American mathematician and his wife settle into a countryside home. At first, the stillness feels like peace, but beneath it simmers resentment, aggression, and violence waiting to erupt. Sam Peckinpah's Straw Dogs is a slow burn, a match to dry kindling. Dustin Hoffman, cast against type, plays the mild intellectual David. Susan George embodies his wife, Amy, whose loneliness and restlessness echo through every scene. Their marriage is strained, their new home unwelcoming, and the villagers' hostility grows until it bursts into brutality. Released in 1971, the film faced bans for one reason: its infamous assault sequence. Censors in Britain and beyond deemed it obscene, dangerous. Debates raged over whether Peckinpah had pushed the line too far or exposed truths no one wanted to face. Controversial then, complex now, Straw Dogs refuses to be easy. Its violence is not spectacle, but interrogation. It asks how far a man will go to protect his home, his pride, his very sense of self. That question, uncomfortable as it is, lingers. In the silence after the credits, the unease remains. 5. Salò, or the 120 Days of Sodom, 1975. An opulent villa in fascist Italy. Marble halls echo with the footsteps of the powerful, their laughter cold, their eyes cruel. Young captives are led through rituals of humiliation, their innocence stripped away in scenes that blur the line between theater and nightmare. Pier Paolo Pasolini's Salò is perhaps the most infamous film of the 1970s. There are no conventional heroes here. Instead, Pasolini casts his characters as symbols, the ruling elite as grotesque caricatures of power, the youths as embodiments of lost freedom. The film is not about individual struggle, but about the corruption of an entire system. Every Montmais frame is choreographed, every act deliberate, a mirror to fascism's dehumanizing machinery. Released in 1975, Salò immediately ignited outrage. Italy banned it, fearing its mixture of sexuality, violence, and political allegory was simply too corrosive. Other nations followed. In Britain, it was kept out of circulation for decades, whispered about in cinephile circles like contraband. Australia, New Zealand, and even parts of Europe imposed bans or severe restrictions. And yet, the film refuses to vanish. It endures as an indictment of unchecked authority, a howl of protest against tyranny. Critics still debate, is it art or exploitation? Pasolini himself would not live to answer, murdered under mysterious circumstances before the film's release. That tragedy deepened its legend. Salò remains one of cinema's most haunting provocations, not for what it shows, but for the truths it dares to expose. 6. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre, 1974. A dusty Texas road, a van rattles down the highway under a punishing sun. Ahead lies a farmhouse, innocent at first glance, but within, horror waits with a chainsaw's roar. Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is not just a film, it's an ordeal. At the heart is Sally Hardesty, played by Marilyn Burns, whose resilience becomes the film's desperate pulse. Her friends fall one by one to Leatherface, the mute, masked butcher who moves with both brute force and childlike confusion. Their encounter is not clean horror, it is sweat, dirt, the smell of blood, and decay. Released in 1974, audiences had never seen anything like it. The violence, though more suggested than shown, was so raw in its presentation that many believed they had witnessed something far gorier. Bans rolled in across countries like the UK, Brazil, and Singapore. Some theaters pulled it after a single showing, citing fainting and panic in audiences. But Chainsaw also became a legend. Its low budget turned into an asset, giving it documentary grit. Critics who dismissed it as depraved exploitation slowly began to reconsider. Today, it's hailed as a cornerstone of modern horror, not for its gore, but for its suffocating atmosphere. Leatherface is no monster from myth, but a twisted reflection of human cruelty hiding in plain daylight. That is what still terrifies. 7. Last Tango in Paris, 1972. A cavernous Paris apartment, light pours through tall windows, illuminating two strangers entangled in a relationship defined not by love, but by raw, aching need. Bernardo Bertolucci's Last Tango in Paris dared to strip away the illusions of romance, leaving only desire, grief, and emotional violence. Marlon Brando plays Paul, a middle-aged American reeling from his wife's death. Maria Schneider is Jean, a young woman on the cusp of marriage. Their encounters unfold without names, without pasts, only bodies, only fleeting connection. Their intimacy is less about pleasure than about power, emptiness, and desperation. When it premiered in 1972, the film shocked the world. Italy banned it outright, even sentencing Bertolucci to a suspended prison term for obscenity. Other countries censored or heavily cut it. Audiences were polarized. Some hailed it as fearless art. Others condemned it as scandalous pornography. The Catholic Church called it sinful. Censors across Europe scrambled to contain it. Over time, the controversy deepened. Brando's performance was hailed as one of his most vulnerable, a man unraveling in real time. But Schneider's later accounts of the filming, of trauma and lack of consent, cast a shadow that remains unresolved. What lingers today is not just the scandal, but the raw intensity of cinema daring to expose wounds most films conceal. It is a work at once powerful, disturbing, and tragic. 8. Snuff, 1976. A grainy handheld camera, a film set blurred between fiction and nightmare. Actors scream, lights flicker, and suddenly, what was staged feels real. This was the trick of Snuff, a low-budget exploitation film that became one of the most controversial releases of the 1970s. The film itself, originally called Slaughter, was a routine South American horror movie. But in 1976, its American distributors added a final scene shot, guerrilla style, in a New York apartment. In it, a woman is seemingly murdered on camera. Blood gushes, the crew flees, and the audience is left with one chilling question. Was it real? That question was enough to spark hysteria. Advertised as a genuine snuff film, theaters were besieged by protests. Women's rights groups marched against it. Politicians demanded investigations. Newspapers ran headlines warning of real murder disguised as entertainment. It was banned or pulled from theaters across multiple states. In reality, the infamous ending was staged. But perception mattered more than truth. The myth of snuff fed into urban legends about underground films showing real killings. It cemented the very concept of a snuff movie in popular culture. Today, the film itself is mostly forgotten, cheaply made, poorly acted. But its impact lingers. It blurred the fragile line between cinema and reality, reminding audiences of the power of suggestion. Sometimes what people believe is more terrifying than what they see. 9. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. A woman alone in the woods, the sound of rustling leaves, the sudden intrusion of laughter, cruel, predatory. What follows is one of the most notorious sequences in exploitation cinema, and one that would forever divide audiences and critics. I Spit on Your Grave arrived at the close of the 1970s like a thunderclap. Camille Keaton stars as Jennifer Hills, a writer retreating to the countryside for solitude and inspiration. What she finds instead is violence, inflicted by a group of men who mistake her vulnerability for weakness. But Jennifer refuses to remain a victim. Her story transforms into one of revenge, brutal, and unrelenting, making audiences squirm as much in her vengeance as in her suffering. Released in 1978, the film was condemned almost instantly. Critics like Roger Ebert called it vile and worthless, while feminist organizations accused it of exploitation. Britain placed it on its infamous Video Nasties list, banning it for decades. Other nations followed, unwilling to sanction a film so graphic in its portrayal of assault and retribution. And yet, buried within its controversy lies a raw, unsettling power. For some, Jennifer's vengeance symbolized female rage long silenced on screen. For others, it was unbearable exploitation. That debate continues today. But what cannot be denied is its impact, a mirror held to violence, to vengeance, and to the dangerous catharsis of survival. 10. Bloodsucking Freaks, 1976. A theater of horrors. The stage lights rise to reveal women bound, mutilated, forced into grotesque performances before a jeering audience. Behind it all is Sardou, a sadistic showman whose cruelty knows no bounds. Joel M. Reed's Bloodsucking Freaks was never meant for mainstream acceptance. It was designed to shock, and it succeeded all too well. The film features Seamus O'Brien as Sardou, reveling in theatrical sadism, and Niles McMaster as the unwilling observer drawn into his grotesque circus. There is little plot to soften the spectacle, only a relentless parade of violence and degradation. Every scene pushes further, testing what audiences could endure. Upon release in 1976, it provoked outrage on every front. Women's rights groups organized pickets outside theaters, accusing it of glorifying torture and misogyny. Censors slashed it apart, but many regions simply banned it outright. Its reputation as one of the most offensive exploitation films ever made was sealed. And yet, its notoriety gave it a perverse kind of immortality. Bootlegs circulated, midnight screenings flourished, and horror aficionados whispered about it in hushed tones. Today, it remains a symbol of exploitation, cinema's ugliest extremes, not celebrated, but remembered as a reminder of how far cinema once dared or stooped to go. 11. Carnal Knowledge, 1971. An empty dorm room. Two college men talk casually about sex, women, the future, their words laced with bravado and insecurity. From this small beginning, Mike Nichols's Carnal Knowledge traces the arc of desire, disappointment, and disillusionment across decades. It is a quieter film than others on this list, but no less shocking for its honesty. Jack Nicholson plays Jonathan, a man whose relationships are defined by lust, control, and dissatisfaction. Opposite him is Art Garfunkel's Sandy, more romantic but equally lost in his search for meaning. Together, their lives intertwine with women played by Anne Margaret and Candice Bergen, whose characters illuminate the era's shifting sexual politics. Released in 1971, the film was daringly candid about sex, its joys, its emptiness, its consequences, but its frankness sparked outrage. In Georgia, it led to an obscenity trial that climbed all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. Only when the justices ruled in its favor was the film's right to exist fully secured. Its impact endures. Unlike the sensationalism of other banned works, Carnal Knowledge shocked by stripping away illusions. It forced audiences to confront the hollowness beneath the sexual revolution's promises. Even now, its sharp dialogue and bruising performances remind us that sometimes the most unsettling truths are the quietest ones. 12. The Last House on the Left, 1972. A quiet drive into the countryside. Two teenage girls laugh, carefree, on their way to a concert, but behind their laughter lurks a darker fate, one that would leave audiences shaken, disturbed, and forever changed. Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left redefined horror as something intimate, invasive, and unbearably real. Sandra Peabody and Lucy Grantham play Mari and Phyllis, two friends whose innocence collides with a gang of criminals led by the chilling Krug, portrayed by David Hess. What begins as a journey of friendship turns into an ordeal of violence and survival. Craven, in his debut, refused to romanticize terror. Instead, he forced viewers into it, frame by frame. When it premiered in 1972, censors recoiled. The tagline, "To avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie," only heightened the hysteria. Countries from Britain to Australia banned it, while others demanded heavy edits. The mixture of realism, brutality, and uneasy humor pushed beyond what audiences could tolerate. And yet, its legacy is undeniable. It birthed a new wave of horror that was raw, political, and unflinching. Craven would later refine his vision with A Nightmare on Elm Street, but here he laid bare the terror of ordinary life turned grotesque. Last House still disturbs, not just for what it shows, but for how close it feels to reality. The 1970s gave us cinema's bravest experiments, films that dared to unsettle, provoke, and disturb. Many were silenced, but time has granted them new voices. They remind us that art's power lies not in comfort, but in challenge. Subscribe, like, and join us as we rediscover cinema's forbidden gems.